In the original Lego movies, Emmett, along with many other master builders, are the heroes because of the way they're able to put together the Lego pieces and outsmart the villains, saving Legoland. The other day I was listening to Chris Keith, and he was talking about the criteria of authenticity. And he mentioned Lego, and suddenly it all connected in my head. And he had talked about what is the real weakness, the Achilles heel of the criteria of authenticity when we're trying to find out the real historical Jesus, who he truly was. So come with me. I'm going to grab my Lego set. We can explain some of their criteria and then how Chris Keith pointed out the real weakness in trying to understand Jesus using such a criteria. Come along with me. So here it is, the Lego set I got for Christmas. Don't ask me why a 40-year-old man's getting a Lego set for Christmas. Just what it is, what it is. But first of all, just a little recap of what the purpose of the criteria is. So the thought is that in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and possibly the Gospel of Thomas, and any other material, that there are things that aren't true, maybe more mythical or created for the purpose of the church. So we're looking for the actual historical Jesus, the man who really walked in Galilee, the carpenter turned preacher, the authentic OG Jesus. But the easiest way for the criteria to be applied is more to say what is not authentic. So, big cross out unauthentic. So in our criteria here, in our Lego set, we have our bowl here. We're going to call that the inauthentic bowl. And using those criteria, we're going to go through our Lego set here to better establish what is the authentic Lego set here. What was the true intent behind what we created here? For we can remove anything that's not, quite right to get the authentic, real Lego set, the real authentic Jesus. So there are multiple criteria. I've heard up to 28 criteria, but for today, to keep it a little bit more brief, I'm going to focus on 3 main ones and just throw in one for fun on the side. So the first one that's very commonly used is criteria of a multiple attestation. What I mean by that is the more of the independent sources we have, the more likely that saying or event can be traced back to the historical Jesus. One of the common events in Jesus' life that is accepted by most scholars is that Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. And this event appears in all 4 of our Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and it's alluded to in John that Jesus is baptized by John the Baptist. So we have multiple stories of this event. So how do we apply this to the Lego? Perhaps this light post. There's one here, there's one there. So oh no. Inside the garden center of Home Depot here, there is only one tree like this. There's only one independent source of this. So we're going to have to discard that tree because it's inauthentic. Before we get too deep into this, there is a problem with this. People like Dale Ellison has pushed back and say the whole criteria can easily be used both ways. But that is not really the Achilles heel that Chris Keith talked about that blew me away. But that being said, we're going to get rid of that one because it's inauthentic. It doesn't fit with the Lego set. So we're going to move on to the next very commonly used criteria. And that's the criteria of dissimilarity. Now, we'll bring in some more Lego. Voila! Hope you can see what this is. Jewish symbol? So the idea with the criteria of dissimilarity is something that's authentically from Jesus cannot come from the Second Temple period Jewish thought, because the thinking is, well, he could just be mimicking the people around him. That wouldn't be authentically a saying of his. It could possibly the gospel writers just picked that up because it's a common saying around at his time. And just for not just picking on the Jews, anything that appears too much like church dogma or doctrine, that has to go out too, because that would be inauthentic, because it could have easily been created by the church to further their agenda. So the criteria of dissimilarity says anything that is like the others needs to be removed. What is... Oh, well, that would probably be an independent, because these glass doors is not like the others. But this whole... Like, all of this is orange. Like, all of the orange... Whoa. That might be a little too much, but we're going to have to get rid of all the orange pieces because, well, obviously, the orange pieces are way too much like Home Depot's brand. And that's way... Well, that's... So we'll get rid of those orange pieces. Looks like I lost some other pieces. We'll have to get rid of this orange roof because, again, it's too much for that which before Home Depot and that which comes after. So we'll get rid of those and put those in the inauthentic list. There is a weakness in with this, and that is that obviously Jesus being a first century Jew, he's going to think and talk a lot like his peers. But let's not worry too much about that. We'll just consider this. The criteria says it's inauthentic. Let's get rid of that. Out they go. I'd remove all the orange, but we don't have to remove everything. There's some reasons to keep some things. So let's keep that going when we think of the criteria of authenticity. So the next one is the criteria in embarrassment. So in regards to the baptism of Jesus, the argument goes that the early church would be embarrassed that Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. Because the thought goes, if the greater baptizes the lesser, that would mean that John the Baptist is greater than Jesus. So if it's embarrassing, then it has to be authentic, that it was only kept in the gospel accounts because it truly happened, and the church could not deny that. Now, with our Lego here, what is embarrassing? So something that is embarrassing about the Lego set, we look over here right in the Lego set, our nice little Home Depot staff member can't get through the door because the door is embarrassingly too short. That is gonna have to go. So the door is embarrassing, we get rid of the door. That can't be part of the authentic Jesus. I know what you're thinking, because you're a smart one. You're like, I see what the problem is Ryan's losing all his Lego pieces. How is he going to rebuild a set? But that is not the greatest weakness that Chris Keith pointed out. But let's keep going. So, one, this is not a very commonly used, but it's sometimes used, especially in regards to the sayings of Jesus. Because Jesus was a teacher. He did a lot of teaching. And we fortunately have some of that recorded, like the most well-known, the Sermon on the Mount. But one of the criteria is the criteria of Aramaism. Aramaism being, can it be translated back to Jesus' original language, Aramaic? Because Jesus, a first century Jew, spoke in Aramaic. So just logically, if anything was authentically from him, it should be able to be translated back to it. A good example of this is Jesus' discussion with Nicodemus in John chapter 3. So one of his examples that Jesus used is, the Spirit is like the wind. We do not know where it comes from or where it is going. Absolutely mind-blowing. It's a very deep thought, very Greek philosophical thought, which is exactly the problem with those passages. Is the argument goes, so in Koine Greek, spirit and wind are the same word. So that wordplay that Jesus is doing in John chapter 3 when he's talking to Nicodemus only works if he's talking in Greek. If he were talking in Aramaic, which is the most likely language that these two Jewish men were talking, the whole analogy, the whole point all falls apart. So then they would say that is inauthentic because it can't be translated back and forth to the original. Oh, that's actually, this set might have entirely passed. So, doesn't apply to our Lego set. And as I said earlier, so this isn't the actual greatest weakness of the criteria of authenticity that Chris Keith points out. No, it's not the fact that I've lost a bunch of pieces. No, we can work with that. And if we're going to be honest with ourselves, even what we have, the four Gospels, if we say 100% of it was authentically back to the original Jesus, the historical Jesus, we still have to admit we are missing pieces. So maybe even with those missing pieces, and we get lost a little bit more, we can still create somewhat of an image of who the historical Jesus was. But Chris Keith points out that this is actually the true weakness of it. So where is Emmett? Remember our master builders? So Emmett wasn't as good as some of his colleagues, but they were able to rebuild the pieces and envision things that did not come in the set. So even if all these pieces were taken apart, we had nothing but a big pile of pieces here, some of which we have said are inauthentic, but we still have all these Lego pieces here. But then, in our big pile, oh, Emmett had fallen down. Emmett comes back in, and he's our master builder. He's our scholar. He's our historian. And he has come back and he sees all of these pieces. And then he visualizes, what can I build out of it? And if you're lucky, he'll put together something that looks like Home Depot. But if you're not lucky, he'll put together a double-decker couch, which may be ideal and may save us in our moment of crisis. But it is not the authentic historical Jesus, which we are trying to reconstruct.